Walker is the Director of Sustainability with OPN Architects. He served on many organizations, including AIA National Committee on the Environment, the 2030 Commitment Working Group, USGBC's Energy and Atmosphere Technical Advisory Group, and was a co-author of the Coach Toolkit, which if you haven't looked at that, it's a really great tool. You should look it up. I could say more. Dave's a great guy, but I will give them the time for today. Thank you everyone for being here. And please silence cell phones.
Okay. Wow, this is exciting. Thanks all for coming. So on here, I'm going to be talking about ethics, sustainability, and design excellence, and connecting those three ideas, and showing how they're actually inextricable in our work. I've got an amazing panel up here with me today to help me talk about this. We have Becky Alexander from LHB, Ty McElvain from Snow Acrylic, and Simona Fisher from MSR Design. So I'm really excited about this, guys. We're going to show you how these ideas walk and work in Minnesota. Incidentally, all your firms have won a National Code Award in the past, so we have some great representation in the state for these ideas. What I'm going to do is I'm going to look at it from a historical perspective first and give you some context. We're going to talk about what's happening now, and then we are going to go into where we need to be as a profession in the next couple of years. I think it's critical that architects look forward and lead with a vision of what a good green future looks like, not doom and gloom, and that we do this clearly and expressively and proactively. It's not something that we want to be looking back on and acting retroactively. So I think there's a lot of potential out there, and I want to share with you how today. Instead of focus on the barriers to doing it, there are a lot of great tools out there and exciting things. So hopefully a lot of you saw Bill Leddy talk yesterday. So exciting. He's been a great mentor of mine, having won his firm won 10 National Code Awards. I think someone once said, a little bit tongue-in-cheek, the best way to win a Code Award is to move to California. But personally, I think a Code Award here in the Midwest is worth 20 on the coasts. So it's a lot harder here, and I'm going to kick this off the way every sustainable design director kicks off their meetings. It's like, pull a good baseline, right? And poll the audience and see what you think. So if you could take your phones out and go to this website. God, I hope this works. Open up your browser, go to this website. It is case sensitive, so you do need to get those capitals. I'm just going to give you a minute to get here. We're going to ask a few questions. Try and make this 600-person session a little interactive. I see y'all looking up here. I'll know that you're ready. So please participate. I think this will give us a really good kind of baseline. And just be honest. I think your honesty is the most important part. It's totally anonymous, so nobody's going to know. All right. So here's your first question. What responsibility do architects have to mitigate climate change? No responsibility. Comply with codes and standards. Implement as many strategies as possible on your projects. Or achieve net zero carbon on every project. No right answer. I think this is how most of us practice, and it's really interesting to see this. Yeah, I think we know where we need to go, and we know where we are now, and how we're going to make up that difference. So let's see if I can advance this to the next question. How often do you consider the environmental impacts of project decisions in your practice? Rarely, sometimes, often, always. It's like magic. This is so cool. I love the honesty here. This is really great. I think we can all do better, but this gives us a really good baseline. And what I'm seeing is sometimes, often are sort of the most common answers. Always is up there, but maybe running a little bit behind in the third place. And some of you really need some work. I mean, it's your standard curve of adoption, right? You've got your early adopters. Thankfully, there are not many laggards in the audience. Okay, great. How often does your firm discuss environmental impacts of project decisions with your clients? Didn't have to think too hard about that one. All right. Duly noted. Thank you. So sometimes it's definitely taking the day. I've got my work cut out for me this morning. Is your firm a signatory to the AIA 2030 commitment? I promise we're almost done. I know these are... But I think they provide really good context for what we're going to talk about today. No, and I don't know. Okay, so obviously, again, a little bit of messaging is important. It's great to have that context. From my perspective, we do a lot of initiatives at OPN Architects around sustainability, and some are good, some are not so good. This is one of the best I've had the pleasure to manage at my firm. It's really made a difference for us, and if I could convince you to sign up and get going on this, I would love to do that. And that's it for the poll. So thanks for that baseline. That's really good. All right. Okay. So I said I'd give you a little bit of history. I only want to do a few slides on this, but AIA has a long history of ethics and sustainability in the organization. Back in 1990, Bob Birkbeil started COAT, and it's been going strong ever since. In '97, they started the COAT Awards, so we've got 24 years of amazing projects to look at. And the amount of change that's happened over time is great. There are a lot of other great milestones along the way, but certainly I think you know, it's been a great run. The Code Awards, they're the oldest running sustainable design award in the world. So it gets out there, it gets beyond architects, it gets beyond designers, into the general public. And I think if we want to share the value of design, this is a great vehicle to do it. The other thing that we were responsible for was the 2030 commitment. This was a huge sort of endeavor that we took up in 2007, I believe. And yeah, it's kind of really changed practice quite a bit. So just a couple of things, some milestones to point out. But we've been really busy over the past couple of years. In 2018, we launched the Code Toolkit. And that was taking this Code Top 10 Design Award and flipping it from something that we looked at after the building was done into a design driver. It was kind of the operating manual, if you will, for how to get a Code Award. This is what I worked on, and I'm really proud of it. I've been going all over the country this year telling people about it. It's been published in most of the major architectural periodicals. 15,000 people have accessed it. We've been talking to Sweden about integrating it for them, and it's really kind of jazzed a lot of people up about how you can integrate this stuff on all of your projects. We've passed a successful climate action resolution. We adopted the framework for design excellence, and I'm going to get into all the details here in a few slides. And developed a common app, there's an app for that, to help align our awards across components, knowledge communities, honor awards, so that our award system really value what we as architects value. So next year is going to be our 30th anniversary of the code, and then 50th anniversary of birthday, and we're going to ratchet up our 2030 commitment to 80% savings. So a lot to celebrate, a lot of work to do, and I'm really looking forward to that. It's a big year. Now the AIA as a whole has done a lot, especially over the last couple of years. In 2017, they wrote Where We Stand on Climate Action. So taking a public position on this a few years ago was a real leadership position. I think we would have done it sooner, but there's a lot of pressure that you're going to split your constituency down the middle, and with a really divisive topic. But after having done this, a lot of sister organizations across the world adopted similar statements on climate change. And as a first step, just acknowledging it publicly is really, really important. In 2018, we updated our Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct. And why this is important is, there's our state board licensure, which, tells us what health, safety, and welfare requirements we need to meet. But as members of the AIA, we have a higher calling. We have ethical standards, and these are what separate us from all the other architects out there. So Canon 6 is obligations to the environment. And the way that the Code of Ethics work is there are really 3 tiers. The canons are the broad sort of areas of ethics. And this one says members should recognize and acknowledge the professional responsibilities they have to promote sustainable design and development in the natural and built environment, and to implement energy and resource conscious design. So just as a big picture, this is what we need to be doing. The ethical standards, they're a little bit more specific, but still aspirational, and they cover energy conservation, water use, building materials, ecosystems, and climate change. But this is where the rubber meets the road, right? This is the rule, and the rules are enforceable. This one says, members shall consider with their clients the environmental effects of their project decisions. Members shall consider with their clients the environmental effects of their project decisions. Now, if I flip back to that poll, do you recall where we were on that? Maybe a third said rarely to sometimes, and only some said always. But this is the rule. We have adopted it, and this is what we practice by. So we really need to embrace this and move this conversation forward. We cool with that? All right. So that's the history. Now where we are now. In June in Las Vegas, we had a resolution for urgent and sustained climate action. And this was really great. Bill Leddy was one of the folks that spearheaded it. 24 out of 25 Firm of the Year signed the petition. We had Bob Bergbeil get up and make an impassioned speech before the delegates. The emerging professionals were there, and we had a lot of amazing people lined up to talk. And so this was a really pivotal moment, I think, for the organization as a whole. The resolution identified three things: focus on carbon reduction, transform day-to-day practice, and build the AIA framework for design excellence. Analyze and utilize external messaging. So that's all about communications. It's about getting this message out there, not only to the membership, but to the clients and the public at large. We need to be doing everything we can to kind of push this forward. So here's the vote. And this is as clear as it gets, folks. 93% voted yes for this resolution. The way it works, I think, with delegates is that sometimes you control a greater number of delegates, and the only thing I can figure out for the no's and abstains is like some people couldn't figure out their keypads. So, clear message from the delegates, from the people who run our chapters, who volunteer, who are committed to this organization. This is the way we need to go, and it's really exciting to have that kind of consensus among us. So the next step, and this happened just September this year, was the ratification of the resolution. And so the board of directors said, they were going to adopt the CODE Top 10 measures of design, and they were going to make those, instead of just the CODE measures, the entire organization's measures of design excellence. So from 15,000 people and a large KC to all 90,000 of us. And that's where we are today. So pretty powerful move. And now we're kind of in this space where we're figuring out what that means. Good? That's where we are. So the world's changing, right? This is a Fubot, $200, sits on your desk, and it measures temperature, humidity, and 5 different sort of particulate contaminants in the air. Just 2 years ago, a test like this, you do it one time, you'd have to have a professional out on site, and then start around $10,000. Right? So people expect their buildings to support health and well-being, and for the first time, clients have access to tools that can measure the outcomes. If you're not delivering it, there's a huge risk for us out there. We're also seeing applications like this. This is a long-haul jetliner, where they've integrated circadian lighting that's tuned to where your destination is. So when you get there, there's less jet lag, you're plugged in sooner. These are things that are prevalent throughout society. They're not just in buildings anymore. And I think it behooves us to see how they might walk and work in our practices. This is my colleague Elon Musk showing off his filters in the Tesla. These are MERV 13 filters. So we've been doing this for a long time in buildings, but I had never seen an architect get up there with his filter and like demonstrate how they work or why they're great. The Tesla has something called the biohazard mode. So if a dirty bomb were to hit, you could go to your Tesla, flip on ultrafiltration, and have better air quality in your car than you would outside in your buildings, in your office, or your home. This proved to have a really practical purpose with all the fires in California, right? So this kind of stuff is really meaningful to our clientele, to our occupants, to our users, and people are selling it. So you should get up there and sell it too. I want to see everybody move to the always column in that one poll. Everybody recognizes Greta. She represents the younger generation, that we will be held accountable if we don't move this conversation forward. This is one of Carl Elefante's quotes. He was the former president of the AIA in 2018, I believe. Architects don't need to seek relevance, only to seize it. These things are on the headlines every day, and they are absolutely a part of our practice. So we need to be integrating that. Great. So now we're at design excellence and what that actually means. And I want to talk a little bit about ways this plays out in my own practice, but also on these committees and for AIA in general. So Code Top 10, there are 10 topics. It's really, really simple. It's accessible. It is holistic. And what I like about it is I've never found a sustainable concept that doesn't fit within these 10 categories. They're really robust from that perspective. The first one is design for integration. This is where you talk about the big idea. This is putting design at the center of the rating system and why it's different from everything else that's out there. So I think this is where you talk about it. These projects are coat winners over the past 10 years or so, and they do a really excellent job of demonstrating these criteria. Design for community. How does the project contribute to a walkable, human-scaled community both within and beyond the property lines? How does it integrate social equity? Design for ecology. In what ways does the project respond to the ecology of this place? What makes it unique? What makes it culturally significant? One of the other advantages of this is you lead with a question. And really good designers ask really good questions, but a lot of us don't know what questions to ask. And these are super powerful to engage with your clients. They're open-ended questions and allow them to explore how they might apply to this particular project or to their goals. Design for water. How does this project use water wisely and handle rainfall responsibly? This is the Bullet Center. That roof is a PV array, but collects gray water and supplies the entire needs of the building. It's net zero water. And the website details all of the systems down pretty finely, so that it's not just about an award and celebrating this amazingly high-performing building, but it shows you how to do it. These are some of the most powerful case studies out there. I really use them a lot in my day-to-day practice. Design for economy. We all have budgets, right? We all work within constraints. But providing abundance while living within our means is a fundamental challenge of design. How do we do more with less? And this is one of Bill Leddy's projects in San Francisco. This was formerly homeless housing. So incredibly beautiful and just very modest and spare. There are some amazing tools out there to help you kind of extend that. And I know that's of particular importance in my own practice and here in the US. And very different, I think, than what you see in other programs. Design for energy, zero is a hero. How does this project address climate change through the reduction, generation, and decarbonization of energy use? So what are your operational carbon savings? Design for wellness. How does this project promote the health and wellness of occupants? Design for resources. This is all about materials. Design for change. This could be resilience, flexibility, a number of things. And then design for discovery. It's all about learning through the design process and how did your outcomes match expectations during the design. So post-occupancy evaluation and a whole bunch of tools in this area as well. And being able to tell that story. So those are the measures of design excellence. Pretty good, right? Yeah, I like it. So what does this do? Right? Well, it puts architects in a leadership role, right? It leads with a vision. And I think defining these things is really, really important for us here and now. It engages all the senses, not just the visual sense, which is so prevalent in architecture, but the haptic, auditory, touch, the feel, thermal delight, you know, if you remember that from Eshong back in the day. It's beauty that really engages you and what makes these projects different. So I really like that component of design excellence. It's high performance within the purview of an architect. How do we work every day? How does this play out in our practices? What do we have control over in our scope? And how do we talk about it? It's a really generalist perspective, which is great because it makes it accessible for all architects, no matter what their technical capabilities are. But as a side benefit, it's accessible to clients as well. And this is a really, really powerful part of this tool. Visible sustainability. This is not just what goes, what kind of HVAC system you're using, what your lighting power density is. This is all about what you can touch and feel and what makes these buildings different and culturally relevant. It's about choosing your own adventure. So these aren't prescribed measures. We know how to do this. We just need to find the right measures that support the client and the project in the best way. It really focuses on beauty and a central element in what we're designing. For us, it's like why we get up in the morning, why we come to work. Again, we want to lead with a vision and not a checklist. I think that we're too reliant on checklists in this society, and we really need to talk about a blueprint for better, if you will. I love this quote by Paul Hawken. As good management is the art of making problems so interesting and their solutions so constructive that everyone wants to get to work on them. So one of the bright spots this year for me was to see Payette and them win the Firm of the Year. So their big idea was the fusion of design and performance. Super simple, and they did an amazing job at it. They won Firm of the Year because they had both the Committee on the Environment and the Committee on Design write letters in support of them. And that was the first time that's ever happened. So that's a huge milestone, I think. Plus, the work is beautiful. They had this great graph that had the energy use of their projects going down over time, and the inverse of their awards kind of overlaid on it in the other direction. So there is an absolute connection between these two things. They're not mutually exclusive. In fact, what I'm arguing here is that they're mutually inclusive. You cannot have one without the other. And then the other big thing that's happening with this is awards alignment, right? And honoring what we value. So it's defining this. There's this Common app, which is really, really powerful. It asks a bunch of simple questions and allows you to collect this information and use it on a bunch of different awards across the Institute and really help get this information out. There are a few chapters that are piloting it this year, including Seattle and New York, but the app is out there. It's downloadable on the website. I'm so excited to have Anne Schopf here from Malem, who was a big proponent of this. She chaired the Committee on Design. She's on the code committee right now. So it's super exciting to be working and practicing and seeing these ideas come together. I think this is a really powerful change for us as architects. Okay, I'm making good time here. All right. I want to talk a little bit about the toolkit. This is something that I've co-authored, and
help fuel our grassroots campaign.
If the framework is the vision, the toolkit's the operating manual. This is how you get there. And so I'm just going to unpack this a little bit. It's free, it's accessible, it's, some chapters have committed to spending next year delivering educational sessions on each part of the toolkit. So it's really simple and easy to use. There are two parts, right? One's the narrative, the images, one's the metrics, right? So the metrics are in the super spreadsheet. If I had my druthers, it would have been like the ultra mega super spreadsheet, but they thought that was too long, they cut me off. And those are the two parts. So it's the 10 measures. You go to the website, you click on a measure, and it pops out sort of the best practices. There are four main parts to the toolkit. They're the best practices, high impact strategies. I have a partner that he's always telling me, Tate, what are the quick hitters here? I need 1-2 things max. I don't need the research paper. So these are the items that have the biggest impact. And if you're only just going to do one thing, make sure you do this. There are resources. So this is the research that sort of supports the best practices. We all have our files on the server of those reports that we keep going back to consistently over and over again. The canon, if you will, for wellness, for energy, and this is where we put them. And they're also, they're free, they're open source. Those were really, really important criteria for us as well. And then the projects, of course, the case studies. This exists, therefore it is possible. So that's the narrative part. This is a super spreadsheet, and how it works, it's really simple. You probably spend a lot of time on spreadsheets if you're anything like me. On the left-hand column, there's a series of instructions. The yellow boxes are inputs. I can open it, and we can do this together if you want. It's got a series of benchmarks, which for me, this is like super handy because I know like energy and water in the back of my hand, but carbon, I continually have to look up. And so it's a really great tool even for sort of a super user. And then having a context is really, really important in your calculations. Is this good? Is this bad? Have I got a Prius or a Hummer? These are reasonable ranges and sources, and incredibly important for building context in your projects. I really use this a lot. So the point is, what is the point? We're taking these metrics and we're elevating them all, right? We really challenged ourselves to come up with metrics for community, for wellness, stuff that was fairly squishy, right? Compared to energy, which is like a hard metric. But the importance of this is that we're elevating all these measures, not just one. And where energy had been center stage for a long, long time in our existence, I think this broadening really supports the generalist, supports the architect, and the holistic vision of these projects, and making beauty a central stage here as well. So if you have a super high-performing building, you're saving, resources. You're saving water. You're saving energy. But in order to get there, you need to save time, right? Our design process is, shrinking over time. As we add more things to the plate, it's impossible to become attentive of all of them. And so are we overloading ourselves with information and such that, we're not delivering on all of our promises. It's like death by paper cuts. Even for sustainability, there's, such a broad range of topics you can attack, and no one person is an expert in all these things. So what we did was we simplified it. We took a really basic approach and used best practices. And anybody want to tell me what we frame buildings at? Like what distance we use between the studs? You guys don't sound very confident. What is it? 16? Yeah, that's pretty good, right? That's definition of a best practice, right? We've been doing it for a long time. Buildings stand up, they don't fall over. It's pretty simple. It works most of the time. And we don't do a structural model to determine if like 18.3 inches is the most optimal thing, right? We do it and we move on. That's what the toolkit is, right? It's a series of best practices that are going to get you the right answer, or most of the right answer, most of the time. So the way it works is there's a series of measures. There's the 10 measures of design excellence. There's about 50 focus areas, and there's about 500 best practices. And it works really easily so that you can narrow what you need to look up. You don't have to read the whole toolkit unless you want to. But this is kind of the structure and how it works. So in terms of practical applications in our everyday practice, I think this is where it really matters most to me. It's about engagement with the staff internally. It's filling in the gaps in our knowledge. It's raising everybody's sort of literacy around these issues, and it builds confidence. Because you're not going to sell something to a client unless you know what the hell you're talking about. So that's really critical. These measures are all cross-cutting, and it's really interesting to see them support other measures. So for example, I'm really interested in biophilia, but I'm really worried that my client's not going to want to pay for it. What is the intersection of ecology and economy, right? And where can things support both measures at the same time? Low maintenance is actually a really powerful component there. And the economics of biophilia is a great paper on that. And it sort of goes deep into how how to suck the value of the biophilia. So lots of stuff like that. We can't be regular architects by day and environmentalists in our spare time, right? It's about having a singular vision. At least that's the dichotomy I fight with and I seek to resolve. You know, there are lots of ways to use this with clients, and I've had a lot of success in workshops. Again, it's a really accessible language. They really plug into it, and it's exciting to see them take it up. In Madison, they've gone through 3 or 4 buildings now, and they're starting to ask for it in their RFPs, Madison, Wisconsin. At UW-Madison, they have their green building standards built around these measures of design excellence. And what they liked about it was their flexibility. They actually added a couple of measures, design for learning and design for research, that were really, really important to them. So in terms of engagement, it's really catching on with the clients. State of Wisconsin, same thing. They're their interim standards for sustainability, and right now they're working to finalize that. So at the speed of government, I'm not sure when that's going to happen, but in terms of architects in a leadership role, you better believe AIA supports this, right? And if the clients are wanting it, then absolutely we should be doing it. It sort of takes that argument out entirely. So what's really interesting about this, and different, I think, from other resources out there, it's by architects and for architects. It's all about what we do every day. So myself and Corey Squire down there co-authored the Toolkit with Helena and Zambrano, but we had other co-authors throughout the United States providing subject matter expertise. And what's interesting to me is that this was written in the Midwest. If it walks and works here, you better believe it's going to work anyplace else in the United States. So all different types of practices, small, medium, large, different market types, different expertise. We had over 50 people contribute to the peer reviews of this resource. We had 3 peer reviews. So, you know, the information's best in class. We developed this concurrently with a bunch of other stuff that's been coming out lately, and I'm really excited to say the 21st Century Development tool is now one of the tools that we have in the Design for Integration category. It's really powerful and a great expression of what kind of work is happening here in Minnesota, and I'm really proud to help show that. Zero waste design guidelines, again, did you know you can cut 30 to 50% of your solid waste out of your project just by thinking about it? These are some amazing practical guidelines that come with a calculator to help drive zero waste. Again, if you're really good, you're zero. You're net zero energy, you're net zero waste, you're net zero water. This is a common theme. So hopefully I scared you about where we are and where we need to go. But I do want to, reiterate that design excellence is not new, right? It's always been part of our culture, depending on when we were practicing. There's design excellence in the area of Catholicism, design excellence in the area of technological optimism, design excellence in the area of computational possibilities. And now we're in the era of climate change. So the top 10 toolkit is out there. It's free, it's accessible. Here's where you can find it. And thank you very much. I'm going to hand it over.
you, Tate. That was very informative, and thank you for the work on the toolkit as well. Does anybody else find Tate's voice very soothing? If you need to find a seat, there are more seats in the central section. If you need to find a standing place, there's a wall on the back. If you just need to take a sip of coffee and stretch a little bit, this is a good time to do that. Tate has invited the three of us here from firms practicing in Minnesota to talk about our sustainability stories, how we're integrating the framework for design excellence into our work currently, or just topics from that framework into our work, so where we are on our pathways there. So you should be hearing three pretty different stories. I am Becky Alexander. I'm an architect and researcher with LHB. I'll actually be looking back to share the origins of our sustainability story up through the day. So I'll be leaning heavily on stories I've heard from our new CEO, Rick Carter, who's in the room here today, who I've worked with for the past 8 years. So 30 years ago, I was learning to read on the other side of the country, and LHB was a big fish in the relatively small pond of Duluth when we decided to open an office in the Twin Cities. And it became clear relatively early on that we would need to do something to differentiate ourselves among all of the great local firms that were already established here. So Rick tells the story of sitting down with the whole office, which was about 7 people at the time, and talking about potential market differentiators. The meeting notes from that time, I don't think they were typewritten. I think they were on a piece of paper that you had to print with the little dots on either side. Record the decision to become identified as experts in the area of environmental issues affecting buildings and design, and to conduct research to build this expertise. So we started doing research into sustainability and design issues. We started telling people that this is our area of expertise, and we started getting hired to do projects because of it. Over the next couple of years, we designed a house for a person with multiple chemical sensitivities, several other healthy home and office projects, and the Material Reuse Center for the Green Institute, which to this day Rick identifies as the one and only client who has ever truly pushed and challenged us to design more sustainably, which was a real treat for the project team at the time. We had the opportunity in the late 1990s to work with the Green Institute again on the Phillips Eco Enterprise Center. So you may recognize this. It's now called the Greenway Building. It's on the corner of Hiawatha and 28th Street in South Minneapolis, right on the Blue Line LRT and the Greenway bike path. So this building was a lead pilot project, and it ended up winning an AIA COAT Top 10 Award in the year 2000. Now, obviously, this was years before those top 10 measures, the Framework for Design Excellence, but we actually see a lot of parallels with these measures in this case study. So it actually started with design for community and economy as a result of community resistance to the county's plan to build a solid waste transfer station on this site. So instead, we have a 64,000 square foot office warehouse building that provides opportunities for employment for that local Phillips neighborhood in emerging eco-focused businesses. In terms of design for integration, its big idea was to be a model for sustainable building, which didn't really exist at the time. So to this end, it designs for ecology and for water by harvesting rainwater and using this to hydrate restored wetlands and native prairie plantings. It designs for energy by implementing strategies like geo-exchange, heating and cooling, air-to-air energy, recovery, photovoltaics, and sun tracking daylighting. Its energy use is actually among the lowest that is tracked by the city of Minneapolis for its commercial building benchmarking ordinance at 21 kBTUs per square foot. It designs for resources both through its initial program as a reuse center for salvage resources, but also through its significant percentage of salvage materials used on the projects, steel joists, wood, and brick. And if you want to talk to Rick about the challenges of using salvage material in your structure, I think he has a couple of stories about that. It designs for wellness with a prominent staircase, with biophilic design elements, and with access to daylight in both the office spaces and in the warehouse. And finally, it designs for discovery by testing out all of these strategies in the Midwest and sharing successes and lessons learned. So one great example of this is its green roof, which was specifically set up to take advantage of research opportunities. So it monitors stormwater runoff and air temperature, and the initial planting was actually native Minnesota prairie species alongside more traditional European green roof sedum species to determine which would be better suited to green roofs in the Midwest. So at the same time as we were working on sustainable building designs, we also became involved in research and policy development work, like our role in developing the Hennepin County Sustainable Building Guidelines in 1995, which later led to our role on the management team for the state of Minnesota's B3 Sustainable Building Guidelines, which, as most of you should know, are required on all projects in the state that receive general obligation bond funding. And just as a side note here, I actually think that the B3 Guidelines has helped us as a community become really well positioned to respond to AIA's call to action, because we've been tracking performance metrics, we've been doing predictive modeling, we've been implementing sustainability best practices for buildings that wouldn't necessarily have been pursuing something like LEED certification. We've been doing this for years as a community. In 2008 at LHB, we started to measure actual energy and water performance data for our buildings and labeled this performance metrics. This led us to focus our research efforts on performance data collection and analysis to see whether benchmarking could help improve resource efficiency or lower resource consumption. So we worked on projects like Minnesota's SB 2030 program, which sets energy and carbon standards based on a soon-to-be 80% reduction from an average building. This is happening January 1st. I hope we are all ready for that. And it both sets that standard, tracks predicted, and tracks operational energy use. So we analyzed the whole set of several hundred buildings that have gone through this to see if there are lessons that we can learn from that data. We helped the Minnesota state's colleges and universities track their energy and water use for their 54 campuses, and this has led them to be able to reduce their energy consumption by 11% over a period of 5 years. And we developed the Regional Indicators Initiative, which measures community-wide environmental impacts for Minnesota's cities, which has helped them set goals related to climate and energy and identify areas with the greatest savings potential. So all of these projects started at least a year or two before I started at LHB, but I joined in on them pretty much my first week there, so I can more personally speak to these projects and then the rest of our sustainability story moving forward. Basically, we found that using benchmarks to set goals and track performance from design through operations helped across scales, whether it's building, campus, community, to improve resource efficiency. And so this was very productive work. However, we also recognized that resource efficiency is only one aspect of sustainability. And in 2014, I remember sitting down talking about what else should we be tracking beyond energy, water, and carbon. We ended up mocking up an idea for a project scorecard, we call this Thrive, that would rate categories, including water and energy, but also including things like health, happiness, and equity, along a scale that we set up as ranging from degenerative, sustainable at the center, and regenerative as an aspiration. So reframing sustainability as neutral. You can continue operating in that way indefinitely as long as there are no major external factors changing what's happening. And so we tested this out on an example project, but we didn't necessarily make a lot of other headway on this. We were doing this, during our unbillable hours until 2 years later when regenerative became a key component of our team-wide vision. So I'd like to share that story. This is the first time probably this was intended to be an internal vision and to inspire us every day, and so this is probably the first time that it's being shared with 600 people, but I'll give you a minute to read through it. So to create this vision, every person on our team, which was maybe 75, 80 people at the time, was invited to contribute their ideas about what we should strive to be in 10, 15 years. So these ideas were collected and shared and discussed at a series of randomized small group discussions. So I might be in a meeting with somebody I never work with on a day-to-day basis. And then I was one of about a dozen people that represents different disciplines within LHB, different studios, different office locations, different years of experience, different genders, to take all of the ideas generated at those small group meetings and distill them into a shared vision. So I remember some discussion about things like growth and awards and external recognition, but the themes that really rose to the top were based on how we work, so research-based, studio-based, embracing diversity to build lasting relationships, and then how our work impacts living systems, regenerative communities that enhance human and ecological wellness. Looking back, it was maybe, I would say, relatively easy to come up with regenerative communities as the goal. It was obvious based on the input from the team that we wanted to move beyond sustainable to provide broader reaching positive impacts. But I think we didn't necessarily all have the same idea or maybe any idea of what regenerative actually means. So our next step was to define that. And we went in search of a definition, didn't find any that were exactly to our liking, so we cobbled together this one to reflect what we mean by our vision. Regenerative communities enable all living systems to thrive now and in a dynamic future through their ability to evolve and produce positive impacts beyond their geographic boundaries. So key points: now and in a dynamic future, ability to evolve, producing positive impacts beyond their geographic boundaries. So we revisited that Thrive framework. And this, of course, is all happening iteratively. It didn't happen in succession, but revisited what those categories should be and what it actually means to be regenerative in each one of those categories. So we ended up with ecosystems, climate, resources, well-being, community, and prosperity. And of course, as we were winnowing down, we were also expanding out. So within each of those, there are additional things that we're considering in our definition. So for example, in resources includes materials, energy, and water. Community includes sense of place, equity, and social resilience. But a key point here is that we're trying to focus on outcomes. So we're looking for the outcome of social resilience. We're not talking about community engagement, which is potentially a great way to get to social resilience or to equity or to sense of place, but is not the actual outcome we're looking for. So that's how we set up this framework and then defined what each of these things mean along the scale. So in terms of climate, we're looking at carbon emissions. And to be sustainable, we're saying, okay, that's neutral, so we're not emitting more carbon than we're offsetting. We're offsetting as much carbon as we're emitting through operational energy, through embodied energy, and we're supporting carbon-free transportation networks. To get beyond that to restorative, we're saying we've got to be a net sink, a net carbon sink, sequestering more than you're emitting. And to be regenerative, we actually need to be contributing to a more broad-reaching reversal of climate change. So that could be contributing to low-carbon energy and material economies. It could be supporting the initiation of a regional carbon-free transportation network. Those types of things are included in this matrix. So this is all still very new to us. I presented this matrix for the first time to our full team, now about 100 people, at a meeting that we had in September. So at this meeting, we put up Post-its of where some of our current projects are falling on the matrix, and we shared stories about pollinator gardens and rainwater harvesting, about protecting the safe practice of First Amendment rights in public plaza spaces, and building social resilience by meaningfully engaging stakeholders. And I think we were maybe a little bit surprised, but also inspired to see that in many of these categories, we are working in that sustainable and restorative and maybe edging toward that regenerative practice, especially in categories like well-being and community, while we still have a long ways to go in other categories like climate, for example. So I'm currently setting up workshops with each of our studios to better determine how we can leverage this framework, whether it's initiating sustainability discussions with clients, which we now know is an ethical obligation, or identifying gaps in our knowledge or potential sticking points in our design process, and also tracking our whole portfolio of projects as we try to move towards the sustainable, restorative, and regenerative ends of the scale. So, you may be wondering, how does this relate to the AIA Framework for Design Excellence, and did LHB really just create a new green building system that we already have a lot of those? So that was not the intent. We tried to define our North Star, and will now be looking to the existing frameworks, including the AIA Framework for Design Excellence, to help us know how to get there. So if we have a goal, for example, a resilience goal, that the project maintains productive functionality in the event of a short-term shock, we can go to the toolkit, design for change, look at those high impact, if you can only do one thing strategies, and see, okay, we better start by talking to clients about their performance goals for the project in the event of a disaster event. So continuity of operations, community resource, quick recovery, temporary relocation. So that's a great first step. Our Thrive framework provides the vision, but it does not provide the path there. That's where we think the toolkit, the measures, will be really valuable, in addition to the case studies that are provided there. So that is a question that we get a lot when I'm talking internally about Thrive is, okay, what does this actually look like on a project? And I love what Tate said about somebody's done it, so it's possible. Okay, so that's where we're at on our ongoing sustainability. That's kind of the end of our current chapter. And of course, what I've presented is the sanitized, easy to understand, makes it sound like everything came in order and it really all made sense version of the story. But that's not how it happened. And I know some of you in the room are from LHB and you know that's not how it happened. So I look forward to getting into more of the messy details during our panel discussion. Thank you.
From Snow Chronic Architects, and I wanted to take the opportunity today to share some of what we're doing to enact our ethical responsibility to incorporate sustainability into our practice. I'll share one caveat. A lot of the process I will share with you today, I'm going to throw out and copy what Becky just shared. And one of the things at the core of our practice is creating beautiful, high-performance buildings. We're not out to create sustainable buildings. We're not out to create accessible or inclusive buildings, but all of those are a very important part of creating the beautiful high-performance buildings that we're setting out to do. And it's our firm belief that if the structure is not beautiful, it will not be cherished, it will not be loved, it will not be saved, and we'll spend more money and more resources editing it later on. So that is one underlying theme that I'm actually not going to talk too much more about, but I wanted to present that as an underlayment for the rest of the process that I'm going to show. This is a kind of an odd presentation for me. I didn't scrub through all of our best marketing material to pick out the most beautiful pictures, because I really wanted to talk about process today. So I'll start with some of our firm commitments. We are a 2030 signatory, and we take that as a serious commitment. I thought it was interesting recently. We do a lot of work with other architecture firms. We'll team up for projects as it makes sense. As a small firm, we have that ability, and we learn something new each time we do that. It always presents different challenges. But recently, I was teamed with a very large firm that literally wrote the book on sustainability many years ago. And they're a 2030 signatory, and we were many months into the process of the project before sustainability came up. So we need to do more than just lip service for this 2030 commitment. It is be touching on it in every project. A few years ago, we set about, our firm had grown quite a bit, so we needed to get kind of serious about running the business, and we created a studio manual that was going to drive how we operated. Sustainability was one of the 6 tenets of how we operate the practice, so that was a very important portion of the work that we do. And part of that was signing on to the 2030 commitment. We've been reporting our project's energy use for the last couple of years, so we're building up that body of data to support what we're selling to our clients. We've been very happy that his team have taken the time to take the vast structure of how to approach sustainability and presented it into a toolkit. And we've adopted the toolkit, and we go through it on each project. And I think it's okay to repeat some of these slides that Paige showed, because it's very important. It's a holistic, all of the portions of the design that we do can somehow be traced back to the many tabs on this spreadsheet. And I'll disagree just a little bit to disagree that it's a simple tool, because it is 12 tabs of a lot of information to it. But it's the most simple one we found, and it's all in one place, so it really is a great toolkit. And really the best thing is that those, if you can only do one thing questions, these are super straightforward, and a little TI project that you don't have nearly enough time to do as much research as you might want to. It's a great place to go back to have a few touch points to get yourself started, to make sure that on every little project you've addressed what you're now ethically responsible to address. So we found the top 10 measures, even before the toolkit was published, as a really robust way to talk about sustainability, because it allows you to tell the story of your building. It's not merely a checklist, it really is a framework. So I'll show you a couple of templates that we use to talk about sustainability, both internally and externally, and kind of show you how it helps to tell that story, because the project that I'll show in the template is our Code Top 10 award-winning project, which was done many years before the toolkit showed up. You do need to spend the time to learn this, though, and our firm over the last few years has had a mildly structured happy hour, one Thursday a month. And before this came along, we've done, we'll do a bike tour to some interesting building around town, and we'll have studio members share some of their recent competition entries, so that we can just talk less formally about design and other aspects around the firm and things that people are just plainly interested in. But last year, we had taken a look at the toolkit and said, this is great, but we need some education to go along with it. So we restructured our happy hours, and we took one measure a month, and we invited speakers to come into the office and had a beer and talked about what goes into each measure. Because again, they're very robust, but there's a lot of information embedded with each one. So I encourage everyone to take the time to get in and get used to it, because it is more than just going into the spreadsheet and filling out a couple of numbers. So the first template I want to show you is just going through those top 10 measures, and I've illustrated it through the use of the Land Port of Entry in Warren, Minnesota. So the template is very simple. It's one measure per page, and it has some questions that we like to use to, and these are pulled right from the top 10 measures. They're discussion questions to get you thinking about that concept, and we do it at a very high level, because within the toolkit are the actual metrics that you need to fill in. So we don't get too bogged down with the metrics, but The important thing about this is it has to be visual. It has to tell the story of the building through pictures, and we use it internally. And it has measure one in the questions, then we can turn it around very quickly into a presentation deck for our clients to talk about the concepts and the precedents and the strategies that we're going to use. Of course, we'll take off the measure one design for integration and the architectural jargon that's embedded with that and just talk about the building. But very simply, we do that for each building. And this was obviously the 10 measures went in place in 2010 when this building was completed, or 2005 when we started the design of it. So I have the opportunity to go back and tell a more robust story with a few more images. But if I weren't doing this at the end of the project, I would be doing it at the beginning of the project, where we are creating diagrams. We are creating visuals that tell the story. Because again, if you can't buy in with the beauty of the project, then it's just data and spreadsheets, and you've lost half of your audience. So using the toolkit, we can come up with the metrics and include those on each sheet as they're necessary. But again, our great love of the toolkit is that, and the 10 measures, is that they're different for every project, because every project has a different story, and you need to dig in and prioritize in that project, because you're unlikely to have high marks on every 10 measure on every project, but it allows us to, for every project, to really use each of those measures. And there's 10 of them, and they're all in the same format, so you probably get the picture. The next template I want to share with you is one that I'm very passionate about, and I encourage everyone to get in this practice, is a way to share the sustainable approach of the building with everybody on the project. And we do that through our instruments of service. No one on site is typically going to see anything in the client presentations except maybe the rendering that gets printed out and tacked onto the job trailer during design. But the whole rest of those diagrams and that story is lost on most people. But they do have the drawing set. So we've created a template that exists in each project startup file that is based on the top 10 measures. And you might notice there's not 10 items on here. We don't address everyone on every project, but again, it's robust enough that you can change the story depending on your project. So the template is intended to get changed for each project, and the project team is expected to go into this template and change the headings based on what's prioritized for that project. But again, it has to be visual. So this is one that was developed for a project, and you can see that on the top left we have basic project information. We want to quickly get to that EUI and list the priorities. If it's all about water or waste for a particular project, this can be edited to reflect that. But it had, you basically need a visual diagram to get people embedded, and nobody's going to read. I don't know how many folks read the sheet specs of their structural introductory page until a problem occurs. But you've got to distill it down so it gets read. And you can see for our projects that almost 1/3, that most of the whole center column is based on the skin of the building. We like to use a lot of glass, whether you're connecting from an office building to the city, or a conference room to the site outside and the landscape. That's just a tenet that we find near and dear to our heart, so we spend most of this page on most projects dealing with that building envelope and the R value and the glazing values and things like that. So we touch on wellness and resources and whatever's important. But it gets into the drawing set and everyone gets to see it. We've also started to do some internal data tracking to try to walk the walk and not just read a template and sell it to our clients, but really figure out ways to embed this ethical responsibility within our studio culture. So we've gone through and we're working on some more robust ways to engage our clients in post-occupancy evaluation, getting the data back from the buildings that we built so the next one can be even better. But we've started a test case within our office to measure that occupant comfort. So similar to the sensor that Tate shared earlier today, we went out and spent a bunch of money on gadgets to stick around the office to start to track. It's in our own office. We're in a leasehold space, which is a challenge for, we don't have our own building to operate, and that can be a challenge for us as well as many of our clients dealing with the same issues. So we're tracking how comfortable everyone is in the office. And these are some of the tools we used. One lesson learned I can tell you is that Access Gear automated shade to make a manual shading well. Automated shade doesn't work for beams if you have a 15-foot high to 10-foot high. So we dispersed those throughout the office, gathering data using baselines. We had to research what the baseline temperatures and indoor temperatures and things were. We get that back. We have each of our employees go once a month on a quick online survey to try to track that comfort against the data that we've seen. So we have both the numbers from the sensors and people's impressions on how the space feels. And then you also need internal leadership and advocacy. And you need it from many levels. You can't have a star young designer who's super passionate about sustainability and expect that you're going to have projects that are built that meet those goals. You need bottom-up and top-down leadership for that. So these are just a few snippets. And like the templates we created that are based off the top 10 toolkit, we're taking lots of things that are already out in the marketplace and what other firms are doing and tailoring those to our practice. So we ask internal questions about how we're working and what we need to do to perform that work and create a sustainability guideline and leader within the firm. We are looking at what other firms are doing. There's lots of publicly available or even relationship-based availability of sustainability action plans. Obviously, we're not the first or last firm to create these plans, but dig into those and find the best practices. And then edit those and find the priorities, just like we do for our buildings. They always have a sustainability priority list. We have a design priority list on our projects, and then a leadership priority list within the firm. And lastly, this is all about creating a culture where we're imbuing all these aspects into each of our design projects. So we work a lot on our firm culture. We have a wellness initiative where each month at a staff meeting we lay out what's happening, from encouraging biking throughout all seasons in Minnesota to we're lucky to have a yogi in the office that runs meditation and yoga a number of days a week. We've shifted beer and wine only happy hours to having non-alcoholic cocktails so that we can get together in a more productive atmosphere, perhaps. There's even a book club to shape the mind as well as the body. And you might ask why I'm sharing a wellness initiative in a discussion about our ethical responsibility to reduce basically the carbon footprint of our buildings. And I truly believe that unless you create a culture around wellness and around what we're doing as architects, in terms of creating healthy environments, you're probably only getting to the level of going through a checklist and trying to do as many prescribed notions as you can. And we're not going to get to 80% like we need to in a couple of months if we're just including prescriptive actions. So we've mapped out, we're in a great spot near the Mississippi River where we can get out and walk or bike as a group. So having stand-up meetings occasionally, just walking around the river. Tracking how we're doing with that. Is it functional? Are people engaged in it? So you need to track that, and it changes month to month, which is why we have that calendar. And as new seasons pop up, we have other initiatives that we can share with the team. So I said beauty was super important, so I wanted to end here just to remind you what we're trying to work on. And it's not getting to a certain EUI, but it is creating beautiful buildings for people, and they need to be engaged. So thanks a lot.
I'm Simona Fisher with MSR Design. and I'm an architect and sustainability specialist. So the idea of sustainable design is pretty simple, and the why is obvious to most of us, but just to recap, in case it's not obvious, we just had the wettest summer on record, and yesterday we set records for an early polar vortex. CO2 is now being released into the atmosphere at a rate faster than any time since the dinosaurs. So we want to be building things that will be well regarded into the future, and for future society to look back at our work and think they understood in the face of an uphill battle, they developed new ways of building that help turn things around. And so the big vision is there, and where things get tough is in the details. You start to put together a series of points that every project team has to report on, and even if it's only 1 point for every code measure, that's 10 new points, and you get a lot of questions from project teams like, you want me to do what? So don't get me wrong, I think the code Toolkit and the super spreadsheet are smart, they're well organized, they're an excellent set of best practices. They are also a lot to take in. The organization would be, if you can only do one thing, it's brilliant, but somehow all of those one things still add up to about 50 rows on a spreadsheet. So yeah, this is my first attempt to distill this into a more kind of digestible set for the office, and I decided not to present it. I think we need to take a step back for a second and say, don't worry too much about all of the small ways that we are each talking about approaching things today. No matter how good of a toolkit you receive or who else's projects you look at, the fact remains that the next move you make towards making a better building than the one you did last time is the next necessary step on your own journey. And we all have to unravel the measures and repack them with our own understanding across the arc of project after project in our own way. So this process of unraveling and honing our understanding of the COPE measures happened at the University of Minnesota Landscape Arboretum's Taschen Bee and Pollinator Discovery Center. We call it the Bee Center, because that's a mouthful. It's our first Code Award-winning project, a 7,500 square foot nature center and classroom space. It looks pretty glossy in the beautiful photos and in 2020 hindsight, as projects do in this type of context. But in reality, of course, it was a process. We thought the client and the situation were ripe for more sustainable, a more sustainable approach than the client originally envisioned, but we still had to make the case. Even if your goals and your values are pretty closely aligned with the clients, the secret is that it's not actually any less work. You still have to justify every dollar you spend, and that means metrics and models and return on investment. So it meant unpacking a simple design concept at the beginning into 16 points and wrangling a lot of variables. And if it seems confusing, it's because it is. However, the whole time, the design team was thinking about how at the end of that process, they were going to be repacking it back into a simple form. So they had a vision at the outset of something whole and crafted that was going to come back together. This gave them focus so that even though they were wrangling a lot of complexity and a learning curve, and there were budget wrenches that got thrown into the works, they were holding up a vision that it was all going to come back together and collapse into a rich experience. Without this peace in mind, the rich experience, and repacking back into simplicity is like setting an intention that is incomplete. So this, a similar arc of visioning is happening on a firm scale for us. 3 years ago, the MSR partners developed a new strategic business goal, which is to be the leading design firm that achieves inspiring generative impacts across the board on every project by 2026. You might think that ambitious mission statements like this are just words, but personally, I can't overstate how much this has mattered in changing the choices we've made, from small things like who comes in for lunch and learns to big decisions like the design of our new office space. Inspiring was a key word for us, and keeping the vision in mind. And we had several ongoing efforts at the time. We had signed on to the 2030 challenge and started reporting, and we had some research practices students that were working with us. But the statement of the intent, putting that out there, it really opened the door to a number of other efforts. We had all staff lunch trainings on the 7 petals of the Living Building Challenge. We focused a couple of smaller research projects around a common theme of our new goal, our new initiative, and we also developed a few new projects that we wouldn't have thought of, except that having the vision in mind inspired it. So basically, by the time you get to a project, we realize that it's pretty close to too late to start internalizing the knowledge you need to apply the toolkit. You need to start sooner than that. And it means that knowledge building across the whole staff is one of the most important things. And this year, going into 2020, materials is our big focus. As we were getting ready to move, there was a lot of talk about how we would try and have a red list free materials library. It's not that that's a bad idea, it's just that it's not currently possible to build some of the projects we build with a completely red list free library. It doesn't include carbon or ecosystem health, and the biggest issue with that, having a better library be your goal, is that it doesn't actually make staff smarter, because they don't learn how to go through that process of vetting materials themselves. So the vision for a library became a materials process instead. And it's got a couple of different parts to it, mainly a set of library entry criteria and labeling system, and also a staff onboarding guide. Briefly, the library entry criteria is a one-pager. We put this together, we hand it out to product reps, and it's for a couple of things. Our manufacturer and rep relationships are really important to us because they help us get the stuff of which all of our buildings are built. And we want to catalyze a conversation and be really clear about our intentions with them. So it's about internal scaling. It's not just like Simona, the materials nerd, comes to every single lunch and learn and asks questions, but also empowering all of my fellow staff to play that role at every gathering. And the second item is an onboarding thing. It's organized into fast track learning, and then material concepts, and then it goes from there into more advanced concepts. This is just so that everyone who starts can have a way to level up quickly. And again, integrate knowledge across staff. So both of these are now a download that we're about to upload to our website, in case you would like to download it and make your own version of it. Because one of the ways that we're internalizing knowledge is by making more of an effort to bring what we learn out into the world. I think, ethically speaking, we all have a duty to share solutions that we come up with related to sustainability, but we struggle with sharing because when we can keep some things secret, it feels like it's kind of an edge, or you worry that someone might steal your ideas. And it's actually pretty counterproductive because you can get caught up in dead ends, like working through an idea on paper for a couple of years without ever road testing it and finding out from a wider audience if it even works. So the antidote is just deciding as a firm that we're going to become a firm that shares more openly. This is really critical for scalability. It's partly because we are small enough that we only do a certain number of projects per year. So our learning curve can never be steep enough to get where we say we want to go if we are relying only on internal knowledge to build our knowledge. We have to look outside. So we're looking outside, and that means we have to put things into that ecosystem as well so that there's something to come back to us. It's actually really critical for all of us to raise our knowledge together. And it also propels you faster on your own journey because when you know you're going to share something publicly, you try really hard to learn it well. And the antidote to stealing someone's idea or worrying about having your idea stolen is just to give credit where credit is due. Without Perkins and Will's precautionary list that they published on their website, without Kieran Timberlake's inspirational approach to research that they share in great detail at any conference that you go to and hear them speak, and as well as the strong leadership exemplified by LHB and Snow Krylik locally and nationally, I don't think we would be where we are today. And beyond just acknowledging each other, I actually think there are more ways we can work together as well to elevate the value of architecture in the eyes of the public, but that's another topic. So in short, there is no substitution for the process of developing an approach that makes sense to you and for your firm. No matter who says you should be tracking this or 2030 reporting or XYZ, at the end of the day, we all have to unravel the measures and internalize them and see it as our own ethical responsibility. And if I were to give one piece of advice regarding the 10 measures, it would be start with the core. Start with energy, water, materials, weave in biodiversity and social equity, and expand from there. Thanks.